On the evening of March 22nd, 2020, residents of a small apartment building in Yulin, China, noticed something was wrong. The sewage system was blocked. Water wasn't draining. A foul smell hung in the air. When maintenance workers finally opened the pipes, what they found caused some of the police officers to vomit. Over 2,000 pieces of human flesh, cooked, minced, and flushed down the drain. The trail led upstairs to a small rental unit, and the woman who lived there, a 25-year-old nurse nicknamed an angel in white by her patients. This case would go on to shock China. Some called it an embarrassment to the country, a story of gambling addiction, alleged sexual coercion, and a murder so brutal it defied belief. This is the Fengping case. Let's rewind. To understand how we got here, we need to go back to the beginning, to a girl from a poor village who dreamed of a better life. Li Fengping was born in 1995 in rural Guangxi, a region famous for dramatic mountains that could serve as the backdrop of an epic martial arts movie. She was the eldest of 4 children, and her parents were farmers who lived off their crops year-round. The family was poor, with every expense carefully counted. But despite that, Li's parents did everything they could to support their children's education. Their house was old, with freshly harvested sweet potatoes scattered everywhere. The furniture was ancient, occasionally given a fresh coat of paint by her father to make things look decent. The children used to share one big room with a single spot to store their books. Their walls were covered in certificates, proof that despite every limitation, they were smart and capable of great things. But as the years passed, they went their separate ways. Li's 3 younger siblings ended up at boarding school, while Li moved into a small apartment on her own. As the oldest, Li carried the heaviest burden. She often had to listen to her parents' worries about money. But instead of feeling defeated, she became motivated. She was competitive and achieved outstanding grades at school, consistently ranking among the top students from primary school through to her junior high. Her teachers praised her, saying she was destined for a bright future. Encouraged by everyone around her, she became determined to change her family's circumstances through education. This didn't seem like it would be difficult. With her grades, she could easily have been accepted to the best high school in Bobai County, a school known for sending students to top universities. But enrollment still cost money, even with scholarships, and she had to consider her 3 siblings, who also needed an education. Her parents never asked her to sacrifice anything, but Li understood their struggles. So she made a tough decision. She gave up on attending her dream high school and enrolled in what's called a 3+2 junior college. Through this system, students complete 3 years of junior college level study, followed by 2 additional years of advanced education to complete a full bachelor's degree. She felt disappointment at giving up on that opportunity, but she never stopped pushing forward. Because of her determination, she became one of the few girls from her village to attend school in Nanning, and even got a scholarship for students from disadvantaged families. Her tuition was subsidized by about 6,000 yuan per semester, and her parents sent her 500 yuan a month for living expenses. She didn't waste a single day in college. According to transcripts her parents later shared, Li scored above 90 in most subjects, outstanding by any measure. In her self-evaluation for her graduation recommendation, she wrote, "In the future, I will work even harder to enrich myself, expand my knowledge, and improve." During her 5 years in medical college, she studied nursing with dedication and continued to rank among the best students. Her teachers had nothing but praise for her. When asked about her motivation, she'd smile and say she wanted to become an excellent nurse and build a better future through her own determination. She said seeing someone smile was the best feeling in the world. As the first in her family to achieve such an education, everyone knew, even without it being expressly said, that her parents were proud. After graduation, Lee landed a job at Yulin First People's Hospital, her first job as a nurse. The hospital was just a 2-hour drive from her parents' house, close enough to visit whenever she wanted. But the journey would drain her energy, especially when she was working shifts that could sometimes last for nearly 24 hours. She lived in a building in an alley right in front of the rear entrance to the hospital. Like most young professionals starting out in a new city, Lee just rented a small room. The rent was cheap, just 350 yuan a month. Nothing fancy, just a standard 5-story building with shops on the first floor and rental units on the floors above. Back then, Lee was full of hope. She was working hard to change her future, dreaming of a better life for her family. Colleagues described her as responsible, attentive, and thoughtful. She greeted everyone with a bright smile and earned praise from both patients and coworkers. So how did this promising young woman end up standing before a court, facing the death penalty? Well, things started to unravel. At the time, at Yulin First People's Hospital, young nurses fresh out of med school were assigned to different departments on a rotating basis. The idea was to help these nurses master various skills and gain experience in a wide range of fields. But this system had its downsides. Constant rotation made it difficult for nurses to form deep relationships with one another. They'd be separated before anyone could form true bonds. This left Lee feeling like an outsider who struggled to fit in. She was never bullied, and no one deliberately excluded her, but she still felt alone and empty. She'd been transferred through multiple departments, working long hours even on holidays. The stress started accumulating. She could handle her work, but her friends noticed she was withdrawing from everyone around her. Lee would spend her free time with her colleagues, but she never really joined the conversations. When someone asked her something, she'd answer with just a few words. Nobody knew much about her family or her relationships. Despite her personal issues, Lee was recognized as a capable nurse and promoted from routine care to the emergency response team. Zhang Wen, one of Lee's friends at the hospital, said Lee rarely complained about her job. She stayed quiet and did her work well. Over her entire career, Lee only complained once, when a patient was rude to her during a blood draw. But her friends had noticed something odd. Lee seemed to be having financial problems. Her salary at the hospital ranged from 5,000 to 8,000 yuan, depending on her shifts, a decent income for Yulin. But during the 2 years before the incident, Lee kept saying she was short on cash. People started wondering, why? Her apartment was cheap, she wasn't the type to splurge on luxury items or jewelry. So where was the money going? The answer was a game called Lucky Airship. It works in a similar way to the lottery. Players have the numbers 1 to 10 and have to choose the order in which they think the numbers will appear. The more numbers players guess correctly, the more they can win. Lee was introduced to the game around 2018 and quickly got hooked. Her wins weren't huge, but they were enough to make her feel like she had some kind of skill. She started researching strategies to calculate the lottery outcomes in an attempt to double her income. She became pretty serious about it, and she wasn't the only one at the hospital who played. Groups would gather, shouting out numbers and debating odds. Lee joined them. They shared food, snacks, and laughter. When someone won, it felt like everyone won. When someone lost, the others would tease them. If you didn't know better, you'd think they were just friends playing regular online games, not burning through thousands of yuan gambling. Gradually, the bets got bigger. Lee wasn't satisfied with small gains anymore. She wanted more. She wanted the rush of winning big. What started as tiny bets turned into serious gambling until she was spending her entire salary on her addiction. When that ran out, she dipped into her hard-earned savings, chasing the dream of getting rich overnight. But Lucky Airship brought her no luck. Instead, it dragged her into an abyss. She started losing repeatedly, tens of yuan, then thousands. At one point, she lost tens of thousands in a single day. Sure, she once won 100,000 yuan, but compared to her total losses, that win barely made a dent. In total, she had transferred 2.9 million yuan from her bank account to the platform, which is around 410,000 US dollars. The more she played, the more she lost. Watching her savings disappear bit by bit drove her mad. But she couldn't stop. She clung to the hope that she'd win it back. Eventually, the reality of her financial situation started setting in. She became anxious, restless, plagued by insomnia, and looked lifeless during the day. The cheerful, optimistic Li Fengping was gone. In her place stood someone else, a woman who was constantly irritated and couldn't control her temper. She isolated herself, spent her time sitting alone, and refused to talk to anyone. And then what seemed like a ray of light appeared. A man named Luo Yuantian, the deputy chief physician of the hospital's spinal orthopedics department. He approached her like a close friend, listening to her problems and even offering to lend her money. She borrowed a total of 200,000 yuan from him, but it wasn't free. He charged 50,000 in interest and demanded something else in compensation. A relationship. Even though Luo was considered someone with status at the hospital, Li later said there was no way she could have agreed to be his girlfriend without being pressured into it. At first, Luo showered her with gifts and expensive dinners. Li understood his intentions and didn't refuse. She was desperate for money. Eventually, he invited her to a high-end hotel. Li described opening that hotel room door as something she'd never forget. The moment she stepped inside, she saw Luo naked on the bed, the sight she called disgusting. She wanted to leave immediately, but he threatened to destroy her career, and she felt she needed to protect her family. For money and to shield her family, she endured the humiliation from a man 26 years older than her. She thought that as long as she went along with his demands, he wouldn't tell anyone about their so-called relationship and would keep providing money to cover her gambling debts. So she kept borrowing from him again and again. Luo rented a room for Li near the hospital on March 18, 2020, but it didn't feel like a home. It felt more like a gilded cage with invisible chains to keep her trapped, a place for Luo to satisfy his desires whenever he wanted. In Luo's mind, everything he did was out of love. He wanted her as his lover, available to him anytime. He even fantasized about starting a family with her. Li felt no love at all, only disgust. She hated Luo from the depths of her being. She felt coerced. She had never wanted to have sex with him, but the money and threats made her comply. She felt like a toy used by Luo, stripped of all dignity. She wanted to escape countless times. She even attempted 3 times to take her own life, but all 3 attempts failed. She thought about reporting Luo for rape, but she always stepped back from making that call, afraid of his threats, afraid he might hurt her family back home. The harassment didn't stay in the apartment. It continued at the hospital, filling Li with shame. As time passed, Luo's demands grew more extreme. Eventually, he started pressuring her to have his child. She tried to break free, which led to explosive arguments. Their biggest fight happened on the evening of March 20th, 2020, when Luo again demanded she bear his child, enforcing himself on her. Later, when she lay in the darkness, unable to sleep from crying, she looked over at Luo, sleeping beside her. All she felt was disgust. This man had ruined everything, taken her dignity, and made her life so unbearable that she wanted to escape by any means necessary. The surge of rage brought her to a decision. She wanted Luo dead. She wanted to start a new life without him. Lee looked around for something that could help. Her eyes landed on a power cord sitting on the computer desk. She quietly grabbed it and gently wrapped it around Luo's neck. Then she pulled as hard as she could, pouring all her hatred and despair into her actions. Luo woke up and started struggling. The more he fought to loosen it, the tighter she pulled. Gradually, his movements weakened. Finally, he stopped breathing. When he went still, Lee released the cord and collapsed to her knees. She stared at Luo's lifeless body and felt something like relief. She'd finally gotten rid of him, but she'd also committed an unforgivable crime. After confirming he was dead, she grabbed his hand and used his fingerprint to unlock his phone. She transferred 98,000 yuan to her Alipay account. On her own phone, she searched how to dispose of a body and then threw away her blood-soaked clothes. Throughout the day, Luo's wife had been trying to reach him. To avoid raising suspicion, Lee took Luo's Apple Watch and replied to her messages, pretending to be Luo. The messages said he'd be away for several days due to an urgent surgery and couldn't take calls. Having bought herself some time, Lee then spent that night with his lifeless body. The next morning, she dressed neatly and went to work as if nothing had happened. Her coworkers actually noticed her mood seemed better than usual. Between the end of Lee's shift on March 21st and the start of Lee's night shift the next day, she had about 20 hours alone in that room. And she was busy. She dismembered Luo's body piece by piece, trying to destroy the evidence. She used everything she learned about human anatomy through nursing to break down his body into thousands of pieces. She severed his legs and arms and separated the flesh from the bones and even crushed the bones themselves. Trial records show that the police later recovered 2,368 pieces of minced flesh. Not just minced, cooked. She hid the bones under her bed and flushed the cooked flesh down the toilet. When the news broke, many people couldn't believe what they were reading. How could a small woman have the strength to spend hours and hours chopping flesh, crushing bones, and cooking them? People say that when rage consumes you, you can summon strength you never knew you had. That's what people believed happened to Lee. On the afternoon of March 22nd, Luo's wife called the hospital, asking about her husband's whereabouts. To her surprise, he hadn't had any surgeries scheduled for a few days. She contacted the police and filed a missing persons report. At around 5 p.m., Lee left her apartment. Outside, she heard people talking about a sewage blockage affecting many residents. A nurse and her husband living in the building had called a plumber who had found something strange in the sewage system. Worried it might be something serious, they called the police for help. The police arrived and examined the pipes. What they found wasn't trash or a dead rat. It looked like human remains. Officers immediately secured the scene and launched an investigation. The remains were sent for DNA analysis, while other officers traced the pipes to their source, which led them to the room inhabited by Li Fengping. At 1 a.m. on March 23rd, Li had just finished her night shift when police took her in for questioning. Meanwhile, the autopsy revealed Valium in the victim's liver, indicating Luo had consumed anti-anxiety medication shortly before his death. This type of medication can cause weakness and dizziness. Police arrested Lee as the sole suspect. She confessed to the murder. According to the investigation, in the period between January 17th and March 18th, Luo transferred a total of 124,000 yuan to Lee's bank account, and another 12,509 yuan to her through WeChat. When asked why she'd murdered Luo, Lee claimed she'd been coerced into sex, which drove her to a breaking point and ultimately led to her killing him. In the original trial, investigators found evidence of an improper relationship between the victim and Lee. However, they found no additional evidence that Lee had actually been forced into sex with Luo. The court stated that the only evidence supporting her claim of coercion was her own testimony. Nothing else backed it up. They pointed out that if Lee had truly been forced by Luo, why did she keep going to the hotel? Why did she let him freely enter the rented apartment? Her phone and Luo's phone were both examined, but the threatening message she mentioned were gone. Police said there was no way to recover them. This sparked a heated debate online. Some questioned whether someone had interfered with the investigation. How could chat records possibly be impossible for professional forensic teams to recover? Adding to the controversy, during the first trial, Lee mentioned wanting to tell the prosecutor about the rape during the review stage. But the prosecutor forgot to include her statements in the interrogation transcript. Because of this, she had to make her statement directly in court, which led the judge to view her claims as one-sided. But Lee was also suspected of fabricating parts of her testimony. Despite claiming Luo had coerced her, she refused to answer many detailed questions about the coercion. At one point, she said Luo had forced her to break up with her boyfriend. She even named him. But when police questioned this man, he denied ever being in a relationship with Lee. He said they'd only met through social media and he'd lent her thousands of yuan. After the case entered the legal system, Lee's family went public to defend her. They also claimed that it was Luo's coercion that pushed her to murder him. They hoped the judge would consider this and give her a lighter sentence. But Lee's actions constituted intentional homicide and theft, which carry severe penalties in China. On October 30th, 2020, the Yulin Intermediate People's Court of Guangxi Zhuang Autonomous Region sentenced Lee to death. She was also deprived of political rights for life, given an additional 5 years in prison, and fined 30,000 yuan. She appealed to the Guangxi High People's Court, but her appeal was rejected, and the original judgment upheld. The Supreme People's Court finalized the sentence. Lee was executed on February 23rd, 2023. The sentence devastated her family. Lee, once known as a kind, soft-spoken girl who only wanted the best for her family, was executed for murder. Before the execution, she was allowed to see her family. Looking at her father's aged, sorrowful face, guilt consumed her. Her last words to him were simple: "Dad, it's okay." After everything, the gambling, the debt, the alleged abuse, the murder, the 2,368 pieces of flesh flushed down a toilet, that's what she chose to say. Whether it was intended to be comforting, an apology, or resignation, only she knew. Back in her village, the awards still hang on the wall on her family's home. Certificates with her name on them, faded now from a time when Li Fengping was the pride of her family. The girl considered most likely to make it out of her town. Her father still insists there were things the investigation didn't uncover, questions that were never answered, chat records that conveniently disappeared. A prosecutor who forgot to document his daughter's claims of rape. Maybe he's right, or maybe he's a grieving father looking for any hope that his daughter was telling the truth. We will never know what really happened in that room between Lee and Luo. Whether she was a victim who finally snapped, or a cold-blooded killer who fabricated a story to save herself. The truth died with both of them, one in a rented apartment, the other by state execution. What we do know is that a girl who once wrote that she wanted to enrich herself and improve ended up taking a man's life and disposing of his body like garbage. A man with a wife and children, whatever else he may have done, went to sleep one night and never woke up. 2 families destroyed, no winners, just a story that people will argue about for years to come. So, what do you think? Was Li Fengping a monster, a victim, or something more complicated? Someone who made terrible choices, but was also failed along the way. That's all for today. Thanks for watching.